Is there a connection between activism and the regression of the mind, contemporarily termed brain rot? This is actually a quite important question to ask in the face of so many different politicians behaving more like circus performers than they do statesmen who are tasked with the mantle of preserving civil society and also serving the citizenry more broadly. And unless we actually figure out this problem of activist politicians who prefer spectacle over substantive action, I'm afraid that the American Republic will not be able to reclaim any semblance of virtue within their statesmen and also within the citizens that enable this kind of posture to happen. So in this video, my friends, we're going to actually explore the connection between activism and brain rot, as it's so called today by so many people. And I'm going to show you a roadmap on how we can restrain the effects of the regression of the mind on political order and on activism, and how we can have a more better ordered disposition in relation to all of this. But before we do that, my friends, hope all are doing well. I am Christian Watts. Thanks so much for being here. If you enjoy political and social commentary with a philosophical bent, then I must implore you, please like, share, comment, subscribe, do whatever you can to ensure this channel and this message is successful. This is a civic conservative project. If you believe the fundamental philosophical character of the American experiment is worth pushing forth into the modern age and defending with moral rigor and philosophical rigor, this is the channel for you. If you believe America deserves better defenders than what she has been getting recently and what she's been getting for a very long time, this is the channel for you. Thank you guys so much for being here. Now, please enjoy the video. So, before we can actually analyze the relationship between activism and regression of the mind, we have to understand what activism is. We have to understand its nature. And we have to understand, logically, what makes for sound activism. Well, my argument is, my friends, that sound activism requires three separate elements that must work harmoniously in order for the activism to be sound. The most important thing, which many of you will probably agree with immediately, is that the activist's cause must itself be sound. So in other words, no matter if the activist is on the left or the right, their goal has to be rooted in reality, has to be realistic, and most importantly, has to be moral. It has to accord towards a standard of justice, which is preservation of contracts, promises, persons, possessions. It has to be accord to fidelity, which are the bonds of loyalty that link us together and as members of civil society, give credence to our social relationships, and also give credence to our institutions. Has to accord to veracity, which is not just truth, but the search and the habits, search for truth and the habits that lead to truth flowing forth like a mighty river within the society, within so many different other things, within charitability, all these different things. It has to be moral. So if the activist's cause is not moral, is not rooted in veracity, it is not sound, is not realistic, then the activist's cause is lost before it already began. But let's assume the activist's cause is realistic and it is moral. There are still two crucial elements that the activist cause requires in order not to tend towards the regression of the mind, in order not to tend towards what is called brain rot. And that is a culture of the heart, a strongly formed culture of the heart, and a strongly formed culture of the mind. Now, many of you may be asking, what in the world is a culture of the heart and a culture of the mind? Well, let's start from first principles. What is culture? Culture are the habits, norms, and customs of a people in a particular area. That is the traditional definition of culture. But so many people believe that culture is external, when in all reality, the culture is actually also internal when you reflect upon the very principles and the very faculties of our nature that enable us to act in the first place. In other words, far from being this abstract idea, a well-formed internal culture actually leads to well-formed and rightly ordered behavior on the outside. So in other words, if people within an external culture have the right habits of mind, have the right principles, have the right developed cultures within themselves, then their behavior is going to reflect that, and it'll reflect well. So taking from this first ordered view of culture, what in the world is a culture of the heart? Well, the heart is the seat of all feeling, of our understanding of right and wrong that initially comes from the heart, travels upwards towards our mind, and then gets rationalized through reason and the conscience. But it begins within the table of our heart. It's the beginning of all of our feeling, all of our sentiment towards others, our affections, our approval, and our praise. All of these things emerge immediately from the heart. Then there's the mind. The mind is the seat of all thinking, all deliberation, all contemplation, all reflection, all inquiry, all of our ability to understand the world around us, to understand concepts, to be able to engage in intellection, which is the analyzation of concepts. That is what the mind is. So A culture of the heart are the habits, customs, and norms that actually allow our desires to be regulated and to be properly formed and substantive, that allow our understanding of right and wrong to not be led away by favoritism, but to be reinforced by the substance that moral thinking requires, that allows our affections not to be the destruction of us or not to lead us to unwise places, but allows our affections to be rightly ordered. In other words, a culture of the heart are the customs, habits, and norms that allow us to interact with the stuff of the heart, to interact with the moral sentiments of the heart in a way that tends towards our proper functioning as human beings and not towards our destruction. A culture of the mind is the same thing. It's the habits, customs, and norms that give way to substantive thinking, that give way to good deliberation, that allow us to be able to think through things not just rationally, but also think through things in a way that does not tend towards the destruction of the mind. Because you can think through something rationally, my friends, and that rational thought can actually destroy your mind because you go down rabbit holes. You begin considering all these different possibilities. You begin giving yourself over to epistemically unwise activities. So we need a culture of the mind to be able to conceptualize those things and keep them in check too, and a culture of the heart to make sure that those things do not interfere with your mind. So therefore, an internal world, an internal universe is actually what is needed for your outward conduct to be good. Now, this takes us to the question of activism. Activism, okay, has three core components within its nature. The first is activism has a sense of desire and emotion beneath it. It is animated by a cause. Now, as I mentioned in my beginning, alone, this is fine, but it always depends on the nature of the cause. Is it sound or not? Is it substantive or not? Is it realistic or not? But also how the activist relates to the cause. See, if the activist is more zealous than they are contemplative, the cause will overtake him, dominate their mind, dominate their moral imagination, dominate their heart, and make them a weapon of a belief system and go against any proper ordering in his nature. So that's the first thing. Activism's first feature within the nature of activism is that it's animated by a cause. Number two, activism typically has a sense of moral conviction. Now, within a culture of the mind, my friends, without a culture of the mind, it's actually impossible to decipher morality because all you are left without reason in terms of moral thinking is merely sensation. It's merely affection. It's merely feeling. But feeling alone does not allow man to understand concepts. Feeling alone does not allow man to interact with the world in a wise way. Feeling alone simply is an impulse. It's simply a beginning to what should be a long journey. When you're overtaken by feeling, you act in a way that you are more possessed by your emotions than you are led by them towards a good way. So when activists act with a sense of moral conviction, without a culture of the mind, their emotions overtake them and distort their perception of morality. And without a culture of the heart, it's impossible to interpret sentiment, therefore leading to further false impressions of morality. The third element of activism, this is very important, is that activism, the activist, tends to pursue some kind of tangible end, some kind of tangible goal. They want to increase clean water in a certain area. They want to get Prop 8 repealed. They want to go ahead and get person X elected. They want to go ahead and champion some social cause or some social issue. But the problem is so many activists consider ends and don't consider means. Your goal is not more important than the steps taken to achieve your goal. In fact, within the steps taken to achieve your goal, your means, lies a significant moral substance that allows you to understand how you relate to the goal that you're trying to achieve. A means is not just a tool that is subordinate to a goal. A means is a method. A means is the unction to function to get you towards the goal you're trying to get. But so many activists refuse to look at their means and merely consider the means subordinate towards the ends. This is not the means justify the ends. This is the ends make us ignore the means. And that is just as dangerous as the means justify the ends, because whereas ends and means are separate and therefore cannot justify each other, what's even more important is that if you don't understand the means in the first place, how can they even be understood, much less justified? How can they even be used properly, much less justified? This is a problem, and this is a problem that requires more excavation. So this now leads us to the problem of brain rot, my friends. With all of these elements, a culture of the heart and culture of the mind and the internal culture of the self are not present, when the activist's cause is unsound, and when they are therefore not acting with any kind of internal regulation, what do you get? you get a regression of the mind, which is called brain rot. Why? Because at this point, what happens is desire and intention begin to form this union within the person, this uncontrollable union, and they become the standard by which the activist acts. So in other words, without a culture of the heart and a culture of the mind, activism goes from acting under a sound and rightly ordered standard to becoming something like this.
I want to mourn the loss of all the old growth trees I've seen, and tell them that we love them.
Or this.
This city was built by the Irish escaping famine, Italians fleeing fascism, Jews escaping Holocaust, Black Americans fleeing slavery and Jim Crow, Latinos seeking a better life.
Or this.
We are going to be in your face, we are going to be on your asses, and we are going to make sure you understand what democracy looks like. This ain't it.
This is what happens without a strong internal moral universe. And this brings me to the instances we've seen in our culture here in America of so many of these activist politicians who behave in a way of distorted moral perceptions, behave in a way where desire and passion tyrannizes them, behave in a way that is distinctly not rightly ordered and is instead rooted in performance. And the thing about performance and spectacle is that both of them are hollow. They do not generate anything except a culture of taste. But a culture of taste that is not rooted in a culture of the heart, which informs our taste, is a culture where bad taste will be seen just as legitimate as good taste, and any attempt to reconcile or understand the two will be met with personal offense. This is one of the reasons why fast food is one of the biggest things in America, because so many people are led by their taste, and they don't actually inform their taste by substantive standard. Different story, different day. This is why trash TV within the 90s, Jerry Springer, all that stuff was so prominent in America. This is why so many people treat politics as a gladiator ring, and why the people who do not possess the cognitive ability to actually be statesmen are being put in the shoes of statesmen, because we have a poorly formed culture of taste that does not conform to a strong moral imagination. What is your moral imagination? Your moral imagination is the faculty, it is the part of your imagination which allows you to think through and multiply the different ways you can behave in a rightly ordered way, the different ways you can actually perform moral duty, to be just, have veracity, to have fidelity, and then takes those and then enhances every other part of your imagination. So that means when you have the right moral imagination, you won't just act right externally. You're going to have a different kind of taste. Your taste will change. You're going to have a different kind of perception. Your perception will change. You're going to begin to like different kinds of entertainment. You're going to begin to invest your mind and heart in different kinds of things. But when you don't have that strong taste, culture of taste, that kind of strong moral imagination, you can be taken into any dark pit that the performers who use your desire take you. And this is where so many of these activist politicians come in. People like Jasmine Crockett, who performs a kind of mediocre signaling towards a part of her base that prefers aggression and bombasticness over substance and contemplation. Zohran Mamdani, who performs a kind of pseudo-virtuous socialistic hero to so many of his base without actually having a substantive understanding of the principles that form and shape human nature, that not only makes socialism rather impossible, but also makes socialism's emphasis entirely erroneous, because the socialist focuses almost entirely on the material universe, focuses almost entirely on material terms without realizing that moral terms are pre-political, moral terms are pre-social. They give rise to the social most certainly, but they're pre-social. Therefore, moral terms are pre-material. The material, how much money you got in the bank, financial equality, all these different things, being a billionaire or being a middle-class person, class status, all of these things do not dictate the moral. The moral dictates all of these things by contextualizing them within the results of the moral, which is civil society, So many other examples here. Alexandria-Ocasio-Cortez, who in that clip you saw, quite literally used the identities of all these different groups as a means by which to motivate them towards political behavior without realizing that that racial identity, ethnic identity is not morally substantive, but our moral identities are substantive. And beneath that, our personal identities are substantive. A moral identity, no matter what background you come from or what ethnicity you have, is what is going to actually determine how good your heart is, how right your mind is, and how right your conduct conforms to the right principles. Because a moral identity is what determines, what classifies somebody as a good person or a bad person. Is what you can use to actually assess someone's character, which is a much better and much more important and much more substantive predictor of action than their physiological composure. But she instead used that standard instead of the right standard. All of these things kind of magnify the poisonous spectacle over the minds of these American politicians and the brain rot activists, brain rot this kind of unordered activism can bring. The mind is regressing because when this kind of spectacle of activism, this disordered activism is in the present, we are not thinking in the right terms. And because we are not thinking in the right terms, our expectations become different. And when our expectations become different, the people we elect become different, the kind of government we have become different, the nature of our society becomes different. And most importantly, the perception and affection we have towards each other on a basic human level within society becomes different. This is brain rot, my friends, as the kids say. Why am I saying the kids? I'm 25 myself, but still, this is brain rot. And it's brain rot of the highest order. We need a culture of the heart, a culture of the mind, a strong moral imagination, and a strong culture of taste to counteract the effects of political brain rot. And we also need, within these things, a sensibility within ourselves that tells us that the activist politician is not what we need. We need statesmen. A statesman is someone who behaves in moral substance, because politics was never meant to be this tool of expressive interest that directs the course of society according to the whims of those who happen to hold it, or according to those who happen to get a hold of it every 2 or 4 years. Politics was simply meant to be a defensive mechanism of civil society, a defensive mechanism which upholds the primary duties, upholds the moral duties that all of us are bound by as individuals, upholds them on the political level, and therefore allows private society to exist independent of those who would seek to harm it, and would also allow disputes and broad disputes that go beyond individual people to be mediated. But when politics becomes the sort of manager of society, the orderer of society, when it becomes the sort of setter of society's destiny, you get a political order that has broken all of its limits, that has broken its proper posture, and then you get a civic order which deteriorates. And that doesn't just happen in terms of external things like tyranny and losing your liberties. That's one thing that happens, but too many people are more worried about the external threat of a disordered political order than they are worried about the internal threat. And the internal threat is the effect it has on our perception, a la the culture of the heart and the culture of the mind they go away. And what happens? What happens is you get activist politicians and get people who perform, they don't do, who act in the way of a circus performer rather than the way of a statesman, who may put on an idea of substance but actually have no substance within themselves, who essentially lead this culture down this poor path of formation. My friends, reject this regression of the mind, reject this brain rot, embrace the culture of the heart, embrace the culture of the mind, study human nature, study philosophy, and understand there is higher and there is more precious to the preservation of American society than what we are seeing right now. My friends, like, share, comment, subscribe, do whatever you can to ensure our channel is successful. If you like these ideas that were shared in this video, join the Pensive cohort. It is my collection of young thinkers who are going to go out there into the culture and who are going to defend and also push out some of the philosophical ideas that help found this country. We're currently doing a lot of reading groups, so please be able to join us on our Discord down below. My friends, study history, study philosophy, donate if you want to help me out a lot with my project coming to you guys. Study history, study philosophy, do whatever you can, my friends, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.